Within Amazon, they have the sort of spare chair, don't they, to represent the customer. We try and look at things from different angles of different stakeholders. For me, that's part of what makes our industry quite interesting. There are so many different stakeholder perspectives that it's only right that we should then factor that into the work that we produce. Yes, we have a business plan that shows a trajectory of growth. It is definitely not looking to go orbital. We began, this might give you a bit of insight to our powers of foresight, just before the pandemic. Coming up for 7 years. Yeah.
Interesting time to start a business.
We want to keep within the bank, for instance, 6 months worth of cash before we take on a new employee. Certainly the first few months, got a whiteboard next to my desk and I used to chalk up paid today, not paid. Looked a bit like a sort of prisoner's wall, but you build momentum. Spend £20 on designing, optimising your current business, and then spend £80 on thinking ahead about what your business will be in the next 5 years. One of the things we've been pondering is when knowledge becomes cheap, where does our value proposition lie? Even if we do have a differentiator, how do those that we are engaging with make that interpretation to identify and understand what that differentiator is? Tech revolution, we're in the midst of it, and that is massively frightening and worrying in some respects, but also fantastic. You can think of the opportunities that it unlocks. One of the mottos we've taken forward, take your work seriously, but yourself far less so.
We have got massive productivity issues that if we do not fix, we're going to be in a real mess in 5 or 10 years. The industry is almost going to ground to a halt. Today I'm joined by Jamie Hillier of Akalof. They are quite a niche consultancy with 3 core service streams, one around social value and ESG, the next around MMC/industrialisation advice, and the third around commercial management. And they really stitched those 3 together. And this is a really fascinating discussion. Jamie comes from a significant career in main contracting, ended up as a pre-construction director. His 2 other colleagues all steering different things, one being around the kind of social value piece, the other one being around procurement. They're a really interesting business, but we have a really deep discussion about the future of the industry, about what's going wrong in the industry, what's going right, how to make it better. I think for anybody who's fascinated by where the business will be, or the industry, I beg your pardon, will be in another 5 or 10 years, my chat with Jamie will be really interesting and I think well worth you listening to. Welcome to the next episode of Growing Consultancies. Delighted to be joined by Jamie Hillier of Akerlof. Jamie, welcome.
Yeah, Paul, thanks a lot. Nice to see you.
No, absolute pleasure. So your consultancy business is probably a bit different to some of the ones I've had on. We interviewed some guys at a business called Life Proven quite early, which may cross over. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys. But so for everybody listening, can you just tell us about the business, Jamie? What are your primary service lines?
Yeah, so we're a small consultancy. Some would call us boutique. We typically focus in 3 areas, all in the built environment. So we provide services around ESG, but predominantly around social value. So helping a whole assortment of clients ensure that the projects deliver positive impact for the places and people that they're developed in. Mm-hmm. We then also provide industrialised construction support, so that's effectively looking at modern, more innovative ways to deliver in better ways, whether that's enhanced productivity, more safely, more environmentally consciously. And then thirdly, we have for our sins a team of commercial and QS guys who ensure that effectively those 2 other aspirations are commercially viable, and that what we come up with in terms of strategies, ambitions and ideas can actually then be translated into delivery and practice. And I guess that for us is quite a key dynamic, that we try and deliver improved outcomes, but make sure that whatever we write as a strategy consultant actually is then deliverable. And that probably reflects a bit of our background, because most of the team are from a sort of main contracting background historically.
Okay, so what's the headcount?
We are, it depends who you count, because we run an associate model, but we are sub 10 in terms of directly employed, and then we can scale up to about 20. I think we are pretty conscious in terms of our, like a lot of firms, conscious about our pipeline and making sure that we've always got enough pipeline for those individuals. And having started with 1 or 2 of us, then building up to those numbers, at times it can feel pretty heady. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But having that kind of associate model is not a bad model. If you know they're trusted individuals, then that's a great way to flex the business because, as we all know, as I am as a small business owner, monthly running costs are quite scary. And unfortunately, a monthly fee income does not track perfectly always to to what you've got in terms of running costs.
No, it doesn't, and I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, in a former life, I worked for a major projects division, and pipeline was king there, but the horizon was nearer looking ahead at what we had in 3, 4, 5 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like not quite 3 or 4 weeks, but it's probably nearer 3 months.
Yeah,
and we're massively fortunate to have a group of associates who I think are absolutely brilliant and allow us the opportunity to bring in real depth and strength when we need it, and expertise in focused areas. But equally, they've got their own work and own business, and that I think that model works for us. We're always keen to ensure that, as importantly, if not more so, it works for them. But it's we managed to find, I think, the right balance. I would like to think.
Okay. So of those, the kind of core 3 service lines, are they often are they mainly delivered as one? Are they sometimes delivered as separate services depending on the clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm quite conscious, Paul, they're quite niche. So they are typically procured individually.
Okay.
But actually, for us, I guess the area where we add value is being able to look at them from those different perspectives and ensure that we don't provide just a purely sort of siloed service line, that we can actually then take those other perspectives and build from that. So the social value and ESG elements are typically very front-end loaded and consider setting up those strategies and setting out those outcomes, but we also then bake in, as far as we can, that contractor's perspective to ensure that what we're writing early doors is then deliverable by whether it's the design team, the contractor, and others throughout that journey. And similarly, from an industrialisation perspective, we need to make sure that what we're presenting is aligned with our social and environmental outcomes, and is also commercially deliverable. So we'll often, I guess, as partners and within the team, have that technique of deliver a piece of work, but then also test it in-house to go, right, well, how would that work from your perspective, and introduce that additional view. I guess it's a bit of a play where within Amazon they have the sort of spare chair, don't they, to represent the customer. We try and look at things from different angles of different stakeholders, and I think for me that's part of what makes our industry quite interesting. There are so many different stakeholder perspectives that it's only right that we should then factor that into the work that we produce.
Yeah, perfect. How long has the business been going?
We began, and this might give you a bit of insight to our powers of foresight, just before the pandemic. So,
right.
That'd be November, December 2019. Yeah,
right,
so
wow.
Coming up for 7 years. Yeah.
So it's been a bloody 7 years in terms of ups and downs. Interesting time to start a business. Probably got through the pandemic, like many businesses, had a bit of a rush in 21, 22, and then trading has been challenging to an extent. Post 23, I guess.
Yeah, it's been really mixed, and I think different sectors have run at different speeds, as you well know. Some of those we have been very fortunate about in terms of giving us work. At the moment, for instance, we're particularly busy in probably healthcare and data centres.
Right.
3 or 4 years ago, we invested quite heavily and made a shift towards looking more towards residential and house building and areas around that, mixed use development, and that, as you know, just dropped off. But I think the sector is always pretty cyclical. There's always the consistent constraints around skills and good people. So yeah, you get bumps in the road, but I think most of the challenges that I think we are geared towards to address and solve are pretty consistent, I would say.
Good. And it could be argued to your kind of core service streams that there's been So we say social value and ESG, and then also MMC, industrialisation of the process. Certainly, the latter one, I think obviously a lot of people associate MMC with just volumetric construction, which is not the case. But it's fair to say, generally speaking, because everyone connects it with just big volumetric modular, that's had an up and down path. Equally, I think we're at an interesting time out where probably ESG was probably really super prevalent. Maybe 2 years ago, we've had some kind of political changes globally that maybe has maybe knocked it down the pecking order, I guess, for some corporate organisations. I think the fact that you're in data centres is great because they definitely need a lot of social value, don't they? I think so. It's probably a great space to be in at the moment. But it's fair to say those two service lines alone have probably been ones that have had a bit of a roller coaster ride. I would say maybe more as a layman that may become, you may say that's completely incorrect, but just curious about that in terms of the journey you've had on both of those.
I think you're spot on. Definitely the language and some of the articles that you would have read in the press, I think, are reflective of quite a lot of the discussion, and probably those people who have the knowledge and understanding that moves beyond that are probably not really the people that we actually serve. So it's definitely an issue to navigate through and has an impact. But equally, I would say beneath the skin of it, how exactly you frame industrialisation, for instance, it comes down to, can we do things in more efficient ways that deliver improved economic, environmental and social outcomes. So whether that is driving improved productivity, that is a theme and a language point that we should all be relatively agreeable around, and exactly how that manifests itself, whether that is choosing a particular off-site technology, or whether it's greater digitisation, or whether it's working in a form of an alliance, or whether it's setting up some other structure. There's different ways to achieve that outcome. So yeah, for us it can at times feel a bit like you are swimming uphill, but actually the underlying need of doing things in doing better things in better ways still remains, and I'd like to think, albeit the way I explain it probably doesn't portray this, but I'd like to think we're relatively versatile in navigating through that. So.
And what I should have added to that before I asked the question, Jamie, so before I take you up with that one, is but it still has to be the direction of travel, insofar as we have got massive productivity issues that if we do not fix, we're going to be in a real mess in 5 or 10 years. So I think because certainly modular is what people a lot of understand modular to be, has had really bad press. It still has to be the future. We've got no other we have no other choice. I don't believe, otherwise the industry is almost going to ground to a halt. So we need to find a solution for that. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, those sort of macro level challenges are definitely not going away. No. And you look at the not to depress everyone, but you look at the demographics and some of the things around skills retention and challenges only get worse. Equally, as we are developing more projects at scale, then inevitably the interface with stakeholders becomes more paramount. Our environmental crisis has been cited as such probably for the last 15, 20 years. These issues I don't think are in any way, shape or form going away. So absolutely. I'd like to think there is always a place in some way, shape or form for us. Exactly what label and how we present that might and what language is in vogue, I think will evolve, and we like every other consultancy definitely have to be alert to that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the genesis of the business? Why was it always was it always perceived to be 3 streams to the business? Just talk me through how it started, why you thought you needed to do this, what was the gap in the market, etc.
So there's 3 partners. We cover those sort of 3 service lines, but we've all got overlap, and I think for me that's the interesting space. If you sort of crudely looked at it like a Venn diagram, it's the space in the middle that I think is the interesting place for me. From a personal perspective, I had done best part of 20 years working for a tier one major contractor, which was absolutely fantastic. Worked with some amazing people on some brilliant jobs that were both successful, and at times there was a few disasters in there, but equally I learnt plenty from, if not more, from those. So
I'm sure.
had a good stint. But I got to a place in my own mind where I felt there was a route to delivering in a better way, and certainly those ambitions were not necessarily me wishing to pursue that was not necessarily at the right time or the right place for the business that I was in. I think, like a lot of people, I didn't want to become frustrated, and equally I was surrounded by an amazing team at that point. And so I didn't want to become the person that in any way, shape or form blocked their development and progress either. So decided in many respects, along with one of the other partners, to effectively have the courage of my convictions and set up a practice. And for me, the opportunity of working at an earlier stage with that delivery experience to make sure that the things that were often described in terms of intent and the outcomes that clients wanted to achieve could actually then translate and be delivered. So there wasn't a gap between ambition and end result was a really exciting, but in many respects hugely daunting proposition, because I think being candid about it, I'd spent long enough in an organisation that I'd started to think, is my value add, because I know the lady from accounts probably longer than I've known my wife. I know how to work through the systems. Or is it, did I have the potential to actually then in turn have a real impact? So some would probably describe that as part of a midlife crisis, Paul, I guess. But I think there was an ambition there to go out and have a go. And being blunt about it, we didn't really know how successful would be. I think in certainly the first few months, I used to, got a whiteboard next to my desk, and I used to chalk up, paid today, not paid. It looked a bit like a sort of prisoner's wall in an old movie. But you build momentum, and things grow from there. And we were very fortunate that within the first 6 months, we had an anchor client in the Ministry of Justice. We'd written their MMC strategy, so that gave us a really good position to not only influence a huge volume of work and capture what their ambitions were, but also it gave us a strong platform to then work with others. And I think certainly the network that I'd built up over those previous years were really generous and kind in giving you that support. And I know John, one of the other partners, or equally Ellie, were here. They would say very similar things about their sort of network, and yeah, things grew from there.
And so, what were your three backgrounds in terms of all of your kind of core disciplines before you set the business up?
Yeah, so I had begun from a SINS as a site QS, and then got to pre-construction director for the major projects business.
Okay.
So that covered a really broad range of activities, whether it be estimating, digital design, planning, the sort of anything putting a spade on site.
Okay.
John led the procurement activity, so that was his bias, but he's got a real thirst for sort of technical detail and understanding around, he's a building geek in effect. Yeah. And then Ellie had worked also historically both for a main contracting background in leading social value work, but then had moved across to what was the Construction Innovation Hub, and she led engagement on behalf of them. So she also, I guess, has had, and I've definitely observed this over the last couple of years, a massive thirst for knowledge. So I think individually, we are different characters, but I think we work well as a mix. unfortunately for you, you've probably got the less eloquent sat in front of you
I'm
out of
sure
three of us
that's not
today.
true.
But
I'm sure that's
yeah,
not true.
no, it's good. We're a good mix. So.
So, but what stopped you? So, did you all work together at one point? Were you all in the same business at one point?
No, we hadn't. So John and I had,
Right.
probably for 10 or 15 years, and then we worked with Ellie at the hub.
Okay.
And for some reason, she saw some light in us that may, for whatever reason, drew us to her or hers. But yeah, we were very fortunate that she took a chance on us and joined us, and sort of things moved from there.
Brilliant. And so, had you and John, on behalf of your employer, been looking at MMC and industrialisation as a so Ellie was, from what you're saying, where she was working, but you and John looked at that as well, or
we had. So I worked at Kier, and we did not a million miles from here. We did a huge amount of work up at Argent at the King's Cross development. We without sort of going through their full portfolio, major healthcare, major custodial, a lot of public social infrastructure. And one of my observations was that there wasn't an immediate or direct correlation, but generally we had more successful or certainly more profitable jobs where we had a greater adoption of prefabrication and offsite. We typically, certainly in the major projects business, had some fantastic jobs that performed very well, but we would also, and I think this is the case with most contractors, had one, maybe two legacy projects that would cause problems. So there was the perpetual challenge to how do you mitigate that legacy. And I guess the ability to almost self-impose constraints in bringing design earlier, bringing planning earlier, bringing decisions earlier, mitigating change through the use of prefabrication, almost as a driver to encourage those good habits that you should otherwise just do, was an area of growing interest. And certainly with the work with the Ministry of Justice, where they were looking at opportunities to standardise and take, I guess, what now is discussed as standardised platform design across multiple projects and not reinvent the wheel, was an area that we started to really embrace and adopt. And I saw a huge amount of potential there in that, but was mindful that I think that understanding from a delivery perspective was not necessarily fully understood by other stakeholders that we're engaging with. So for me, there was a real opportunity there to take that insight, to take that experience, and try and embed it in more scenarios and in more projects where appropriate, where it would create value at that earlier stage.
Okay. So you mentioned MOJ. Typically, who is your client base? Is that typically end clients? Is it also contractors? Who's your client base? Not to all the names of who they are.
Yeah,
but generally,
it's a really mixed bag.
Okay.
There's a slight danger that I describe. We do everything for everyone, which is not the reality.
Sure, yeah.
We have worked for a number of the government departments. So the MHA, MHCLG asked us to with several other partners, asked us to develop a kit of parts.
Okay.
We're currently working for the new hospital program, and actually that's quite a good example where we are supporting at a programmatic level. We're also supporting with the trusts on specific projects. But historically, we have also worked with contractors and ensured that, I guess, the cascade between policy at a departmental level and translating that to strategy, and then in turn ensuring that the language actually means someone to who's a design manager or a project manager on site or a QS, and putting it in language that is easily understandable and translates to action, we would also do that as well. So I think where we think there is a gap and a need for our services, we will definitely go to. I think a number of clients now, through our journey, have actually almost addressed that gap. They now understand the principles, are implementing it. They're running, and in those instances, we sort of say, look, you don't need us. You're doing a good job. We'll often go towards, I guess, the complex challenges, the areas where it's problematic, the areas where the multidisciplinary thinking is needed, and slightly self-indulgently, Paul, the areas that we find interesting.
Good.
I mean, we run within the business. We have probably 3 or 4 rules, and it's like we want a business where we work with people that we enjoy working with. We work on projects and challenges that we find interesting, and then I guess ideally that those two things lead to positive impact. So if we can get that, that's where we try and gravitate towards.
Brilliant. So interestingly, some of the clients you're working with, certainly, central government departments, for example, there could be an argument that you shouldn't even be in that room, insofar as that probably screams at me is like, why are the big multi-disc engineers, who I presume have, in theory, all the different kind of skill sets that you guys have within those businesses, you'd think they'd naturally kind of try and scoop up that work. So first of all, testament to the business that you're getting that kind of work. But why do you think you are? What do you think is the distinction between the business as opposed to maybe some of your larger competitors, who you'd think would naturally kind of, the tier ones would actually scoop that kind of work up?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to answer that. I think so. We do actually work with some of those larger organisations.
Yeah.
I think some of them have tried to effectively hold niche teams, and certainly in respect of social value, for instance, many of them do. So I'd like to think in that regard we differentiate ourselves by the fact that we, as a team, are relatively small, but we hold senior individuals that have that experience and can translate the shift between aspiration to reality. I think also we aren't really particularly threatening to any of those big organisations, and the fact that we'll open ourselves up to those collaborative opportunities is can in many respects be enhancing for them. So I think there's a trade-off in that regard. Equally, we have limits to what we do. So if someone is looking for a large PMO to stand up, or a particularly a service that requires scale, then that is not for us. If, however, there is a problem that requires some depth of thinking, some multi-functional considerations, then that's the area that we can come in, arguably in some respects as a focus team, rather than trying to stand up a brand new team of directors, most of whom are managing huge teams within those organisations. That's probably where we come in. So we often I'm trying to skirt around the term of hit squad, because that is a terrible term and is not really us. But I guess we are quite focused in what we do, and that gives us a degree of versatility, agility. Call it what you will, I guess. So.
Do you think, Jamie? Do you think that is the way forward for the industry now? Because we'll probably come on to this as part, because I think you'll have a really good insight into this about the whole productivity piece we touched on earlier about the industry and where it's going. But do you think collaboration, getting more joined up teams from different businesses together, fulfilling specialist functions like what you do you think that's the way forward for a big part of the industry now, to make sure that we do deliver schemes? Yeah,
I think there's a place for everyone. Is my view.
Yeah.
And without trying to sound sort of too esoteric or inclusive about it, I think there is. I think it's very easy to sort of portray large organisations bad, small good, and
vice versa.
It's just not. It's not like that. I think there is a place for that, and in terms of those collaborative opportunities of particularly if you're a large scale organisation and you've got core service that demands numbers of individuals, then there is certainly an opportunity and a place for those, in the same way that niche service and the ability to spot markets and fill gaps, I think is really valuable. And I'd like to think the opportunities for collaboration are in a whole assortment of directions. We've worked with some SME consultancies and formed a collective and alliances, and there's some great examples of that in across the country. Equally, we've had some great collaborations with larger scale organisations. I think a lot of it comes down to the individuals, and I think a lot of it comes down to that mentality of being open to that, the fact that this is an equal partnership and we can both add value and we've both got something to contribute. So I think if you've got those two contributing factors, the right people with the right mentality, then yeah, why not?
Yeah, brilliant. Good. If we would sit here in 5 years' time, where do you think? Where do you hope, or what do you think? What do you plan the business to be?
Yeah, great question. I think there's people who would sit in this chair that would definitely have much more probably interesting or outlandish growth ambitions than we do, for sure. We talk a lot about, as the partners talk a lot about growth, and we have mixed views on it. From my perspective, I'm slightly guarded, probably due to historical scar tissue, insofar as I have worked at times in an organisation that felt like I was on the treadmill, but someone had stolen the go slower button.
Right, okay.
And I think for us, if I go back to that piece I sort of referenced earlier around, are we doing work that we enjoy with people that we enjoy doing it with, and we are delivering impact? That is our sort of guiding star, guiding light. If in growing we can then achieve that, then fantastic. I think what I'm particularly cautious about is not allowing growth to overtake or overstep those principles, because I think then you can very quickly start to quietly erode some of the other things that you would otherwise hold dear, whether that's culture, the type of people that you work with, the work you take on, all those sorts of things. Yeah. And actually in the last couple of months, we run two sort of tram lines in our forecasting, a pipeline review around have we got sufficient work to keep us all busy to balance the books, as it were, but equally we run a top line tram line, which is at what point are we collectively overloaded, and we have stepped over that line in a couple of instances. And whilst I haven't felt the impact directly, I'm pretty sure through conversations with the team that others have. So for me, I think if we can grow in a manner that doesn't deteriorate those other things that we hold dear, then I'm more than happy to do that. So we have a business plan that shows a trajectory of growth. It is definitely not looking to go orbital and skyrocket by any stretch. I think it's I genuinely can't remember the figures, but I think it's around to have a nice, healthy business and a business that I guess doesn't compromise those other values that we hold very dear. Yeah.
And anecdotally, I would say a lot of the businesses that are in trouble at the moment, trouble might be the wrong word, but are struggling, maybe in fact some are frankly making redundancies, it's where they've gone outside of those kind of, because I think a lot of businesses have those core metrics that you've just mentioned there at some point, and then the organisation gets bigger. They start to pursue work that actually goes outside of those parameters, that they're not going to enjoy, that the people are not going to enjoy working on, that it's difficult to resource against, and then it starts to unravel. Equally, I see businesses, SMEs, that do very well because they become a victim of their own success. They are working with clients they enjoy working for, but the client just wants them to do more work, and you're then inclined to grow because the client wants you to do more of the work, and you feel reluctant to let a client down who you enjoy working with, who wants to give you more work rather than going to competition.
Yeah, it's a real tightrope to walk. I mean, I have to be cautious that my perspective, and that's not me talking for the others, doesn't override the potential that we have within the organisation, because I know our team wants to individually they want to grow. And whether that translates to organisational growth is yet to be seen. We also, I guess, we have certain cash rules that we abide by. So we want to keep within the bank, for instance, 6 months worth of cash before we take on a new employee.
Good.
I want to make sure if we're giving someone a job offer that it's not, for the next month or so. It's actually here's some security behind it. So
that's to be said for that. Cash is king.
Yeah. So that creates a few constraints. Whether or not that then, I guess, in any way, shape or form stymies us or stagnates us or holds us back, I don't know. But yeah, there is logic, I guess, to why we're not necessarily flying the flag and saying in 2 years' time we'll be 50 people or 100 people. And that equally isn't to say that those who are in that place are doing anything wrong, because I've seen some fantastic businesses that you think, wow, that's really ambitious, and fair play, they go and achieve it. But at the moment we're just possibly slightly cautionary, but we're not quite in that space.
Good. Okay. Perfect. I said I'd ask you at the beginning. So where did the name come from? It's quite an unusual name.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a bit of a homage. I mean, we went through when you think about setting up a business, where do you get the name from?
Yeah,
and I think stereotypically we looked at, like, do you combine a colour with an animal and all that sort of stuff, and then you discover most of those are taken.
Yeah. Someone else had the same idea. Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's from an economist, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, actually. We pay homage to George Akalof, and he wrote a piece that is probably 50 or 60 years old now. He studied how markets can go wrong when the client or the buyer in that market doesn't really understand the quality that they're buying. So, and having read some of his work, it struck me that the construction sector was not too dissimilar for that. He sort of explained this in really clear and succinct terms, and yet here we were wrestling with very, very similar issues, and actually 6 or 7 years further on, I think now in many respects that probably almost sort of compounds, gets worse. Talking to a colleague the other day, and we were discussing AI and how do you review and and assess the work that you might have put through the machine to make sure that actually it is accurate. How do you assess one of your peers or a graduate's work is one thing, but how do you adapt that behaviour to then assess what the machine has produced? And that's becoming an increasing challenge. And then you think, well, actually, if the ability to produce those outcomes is becoming democratized and more available, how then does your client understand what the differentiators are between you? So the name, I guess, sort of resonates for us because it's an ongoing challenge that as a sector, and probably us as an organisation, here and now are still wrestling with.
Great, amazing. Well, that's a good segue. I started using that word all the time. I don't know where it came from. I never used it a year ago. Where do you think the industry is going to go? Because everyone's clear that we've got an ageing population, both at white collar level. I think the average chartered surveyor is mid-50s, and that's probably fairly reflective of probably the trades sector as well. Where do you think the industry is going to go? Do you think there's a solution yet? Is it going to get worse before it gets better? Is AI and robotics going to solve it? Where do you think?
You've probably asked one of the most pessimistic individuals around. I think
we have to be realistic. I would say
my monotone probably reflects my persona. So it's, the honest answer is I don't really know. I think what an exciting time it is as well. When others describe it as a tech revolution, and when you stand back and think about it, you're like, actually it is, and we're in the midst of it, and that is sort of going back to your question, massively frightening and worrying in some respects, but also fantastic, and you can think of the opportunities that it unlocks. I think it's absolutely the right question to ask, and it's a question that we've been wrestling with, and I think it's a really important question for everyone to ponder, because I think there is a real danger, certainly when we talk about tech that is now at our fingertips, that we absolutely optimize the sector and our own workflows as organisations, and improve them as they are currently designed rather than what they could be. And someone that we do some work with, who knows far more about AI than I ever could, Matt Goff, he through conversation has described this sort of proposition that if you have £100, spend £20 on designing, optimizing your current business, and then spend £80 on thinking ahead about what your business will be in the next 5 years, your question, and then designing for that. And I think who will be the winners and losers, I think, is what impact does it have on us? I mean, one of the things we've been pondering is when knowledge becomes cheap, where does our value proposition lie? And then, as I sort of referenced earlier, even if we do have a differentiator, how do those that we are engaging with, how can they make that interpretation to identify and understand what that differentiator is? And the fact that the Pope wrote his encyclical, which is like 400 pages, on exactly the essence of the question that you've described, albeit in fairness, his was more about society at large rather than exclusively the UK construction sector.
Sure.
But it tells you, like, these are not easy things to define. They're chewy issues. So I think I've given you a really vague politician's answer, but I think it's an interesting time, and one that we are regularly looking at to say, right, well, where might it go and what implication does it have?
Yeah, it's really and I think this individual divides the world, and I get some of what he says is not brilliant. But I think he's the current genius of the world is Elon Musk, and his observation was about humanoid robots is that, and he was talking specifically just about America, or actually the kind of, I guess, ongoing race for supremacy between China and the US, and he was pointing out that just simply if you look at the demographics we have in society, and that's not only I think the US, it applies to probably the whole of Europe, is that we've got a shrinking population, and his point was, if I or somebody else does not create an army of humanoid robots to be able to do a lot of particularly kind of blue collar work, China will absolutely decimate the US because we physically can't compete from a manpower perspective as much as anything else.
There's definitely something in that, and we've written some pieces around almost a very similar example in Japan, where they had issues from the demographic trajectory that we're experiencing, but more pronounced, and they also had a culture of overwork. So they introduced a series of regulation that effectively you could only work a certain number of hours because people were dying through that.
Right. Okay.
And what that forced was a constraint.
Okay.
Which meant then actually the numbers in terms of individuals available to work within the construction industry suddenly shrunk. There was no work around anymore. Right. And inevitably, as per usual, the construction industry left its last minute, and therefore programs started to kick out.
Right.
But it forced a change in terms of the shift with the use of robotics and technology, and some of that we are, credit where credit's due. We are starting to see that in the UK. There was an example. I think it was Winvic a couple of weeks ago, a presentation that I saw, and they were championing the fact their scheme they were working on in Birmingham, and they were using tower crane drivers not sat up in the tower crane, but actually sat in a room like this with the cameras in a much better environment. Which, when you think about it, it's like, well, that's obvious. Why do you have to be physically sat there in that place? Suddenly, you've then unlocked the ability for someone who's far more experienced, might have been doing the job for 30 years, to not only continue, but then also to afford those that lessons and those experience to the next generation as well. And that was part of what Japan has started to do, where they've sort of had a double or triple whammy, that they've extended the lifespan. Probably a very badly termed word, but the working career of the older generation. They've then also ensured that those individuals are instrumental in designing the new technology, whether that's robotics, whether that's automation, digitization, all the other things. And then they've also used that same knowledge to train and upskill anew. So for me, I think whether our constraints at what point or exactly when the tipping point will arise, I'm not sure, but I think it is there. And I guess some of the work that we are involved in, we're very fortunate to see that actually those, particularly where on larger scale schemes or schemes coming back to data centers where there's new drivers there and are beginning to unlock some of those shifts.
Yeah. It's like you say, it's definitely going to be fascinating, and I agree that none of us know exactly what the answer is going to be. It makes it, I think, difficult that probably a lot of the innovation has to actually come from the big tier ones, but they've got tier one contractors, but they're working on such thin margins that often there's not the innovation budget. I think sometimes is one of the challenges that perpetuates.
There's not, but we see it in. We see loads of good stuff in across the board. I think what is really frustrating and criminal is you see that those pockets of excellence, but they are often tucked away, and the ability to bring them to the fore and unlock them and join them up is hard. If we could better do that, and I guess that's one of my hopes for technology in terms of, I sincerely hope that. Going back to your point about collaboration, that the use of tech doesn't make us any less open or transparent than organisations that we are, that actually encourage us to share more and to increase knowledge. I guess we as an example, we talk about sort of our name and the information asymmetry. We're really keen to ensure that whatever we are undertaking, as long as it's not precluded by NDAs and such like, but where we've got points of learning, we can share that. And I sincerely hope the sector continues in that vein, because there is some absolutely fantastic stuff out there. I think, we often get frustrated, and you reference some of the headlines where things do falter. And I think as a sector, we beat ourselves up, but there's equally some amazing storylines out there that if we could just almost use that to get the baseline incrementally higher, we'd go a long way, I think. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point you raised there, because it's great that you're saying you want to share that knowledge. It's still a real issue in the industry, isn't it? Cost data being a prime example of that. Is like a lot of businesses, a lot of QS consultancies view that as it's their proprietary data. They're not going to divulge it. And I imagine that's the same with tier one contractors, some of the bigger subcontractors. They probably don't want to divulge all of their data. But it would make it all a lot more successful if everyone did divulge the data.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that happens between organisations. I think it happens. I've seen it happen within organisations in terms of degrees. People having degrees of being slightly parochial about it. But I think, there's limits undoubtedly. But I think if we can be more open around some of the shared problems that we've got, and there are definitely plenty to go at,
one or two,
then I think we'd make some strides going forward. Yeah, I think cost data for me, I think, is a really interesting one, and certainly I completely understand why the PQSs, for instance, would look to preserve that, because for them it has real value. Equally, there's value in their people that have that that intrinsic knowledge as well. But I look at tier one contractors, for instance, and you think about the volume of cost data that they hold, and actually if they could harness that much better, how much of a more powerful beast might they be, again, to avoid, not to create leverage, but actually to mitigate loss making, to provide certainty, to avoid the waste where we go through a cycle that a client then gets something at the end that they can't afford. All these things, not necessarily to give points of leverage, but actually to give competitive advantage that affords a better outcome for all. I think that's, for me, is where the focus should be towards.
Yeah, and probably if done properly, everyone makes more profit, which is perfect.
Yeah,
and the client gets what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Good. Jamie, this has been a fascinating chat. Thank you. I often ask to end with who you would say has been your best kind of boss, mentor, leader over the years that you would say has probably helped shape you to be the professional you are today.
Yeah, I mean, professional, I use that word, that'd be used loosely with me. I think, so I don't know if I'm supposed to name them. You
can do. You can do if you're happy to. There's no issue.
So my best boss, I'll tell you a bit about him, and then I'll name him. My best boss was someone that effectively pulled me into the industry. In terms of credentials, I guess he for me, I worked with that as a graduate and for a number of years thereafter. He gave me autonomy. He gave me plenty of room to really get stuck in, but not enough, and allow myself to make mistakes and learn from them without sort of crushing us. I think within 6 months of being a graduate QS, I was probably running 20 or 30 million quid's worth of accounts, which from an experience was hugely valuable for me. The business might look back at it and suggest it was reckless, but it was massively valuable. And he, I guess, in turn, when I reflect back, I think he invested a lot of time in me, and not just me, anyone else that he was working with as well. So it sounds slightly cliched, but I think he was a really good teacher.
Good.
He would probably hate to be described as that, but he definitely tolerated me asking awkward questions like, why has it got to be like this? The sort of annoying stuff I can definitely recall myself asking. But he also retained a really good sense of perspective. And so I think one of the mottos we've taken forward in our business is to take your work seriously, but yourself far less so. And he definitely exemplified that. So there were some real pressure points, as there are on major projects, and he had an amazing way of punctuating them and just relieving the pressure at the right time, reading the room. But equally, when we needed to focus and deliver, the motivation and the direction to do exactly that. So for me, a guy called Paul Barton was certainly the best boss I've ever worked from, and there are loads of things that I have took from him and try to embed, and probably fail short on a regular basis. I would say he was probably the best.
Amazing. I do think that I guess kind of frames what I think is one of the big issues in the industry now. That I think probably when you were growing up in your early years, Paul had the time to be a good mentor. And I think that's one of the issues now, that everyone is so busy and so under-resourced that often a lot of those individuals like Paul who probably want to and could be a great teacher to that next generation coming through, I just think are time poor, because we're under so much pressure now, whether it be consultancy or contractor.
Yeah, I mean, time is I think we are all time poor. I think those who work with me at the moment would probably, if they were being honest, say that I would probably fall short in that regard, in many respects as well. And I think it's a constant battle. I guess I think I sort of challenge myself though as to whether, I mean, I said to you before, this might be a therapy session for me, but I sort of challenge myself. Is it because I'm really, really busy? Is it, to what extent, is it because I'm disorganized? And I definitely have worked with a number of others who were so systematic and gave, whether it was real or not, definitely gave the pretense of being highly organized and highly efficient. Right. So is it that I'm taking eye off the ball in that regard, to create and unconsciously carve out that time for your team. And also, I think there is a degree at times of being a bit self-indulgent, or at least I feel there is, that when there's a problem or something you can roll your sleeves up on, I quite enjoy getting stuck into that.
Yeah.
And at what point and to what extent am I able to check myself out of it? A bit like the conversation around working in the business versus working on the business. To what extent do I regularly go, no, I'm not going to do that. I need to invest my time in the team. It shouldn't be a debate. As I sit here now, the priority is clear, but old habits die quite hard, and I think there is a degree of that as well. And I think certainly the people, I mean, I spotlighted Paul. There's plenty of others that I've worked with who have been hugely inspirational, and people that I've learnt a massive amount. To what extent they were able to manage that probably more successfully I am. I think is a point of learning that I probably wrestle with on a daily basis, I suppose. So.
Good. No, Jerry, I love that answer. Thank you. Jamie, that's our time up. We've gone up to almost an hour. Really appreciate you coming and having a chat with me, and I wish you just continue success for the business.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time.